Welcome to Total Training for Mac OS X Snow Leopard Essentials. I'm Chad Chilius, Adobe Certified Instructor, Consultant, Photographer, and author of the Snow Leopard Digital Classroom book, as well as a Mac user for almost 20 years. In the chapters that follow, you'll learn essential skills for using Apple's latest operating system, Snow Leopard. Apple added a lot of refinements to Snow Leopard that equates to a better user experience for you and me. From improved performance to added features, you'll see how OS X Snow Leopard can make your user experience a good one. Let's take a look at how easy it is to use Snow Leopard. Before we get started working with Snow Leopard, I'd like to help you to understand a little bit more about Mac OS X and what it means to you as a Mac user. OS X is an operating system. Often called an OS, an operating system is software that's installed on your computer that controls virtually everything that happens on your computer and how hardware gets utilized when you're working on your computer. A computer is basically useless without an operating system. It's kind of like having a car without an engine. You have a nice looking computer, but it can't do anything. There are many different operating systems in use today, including Windows, Linux, Sun Solaris, and many more. More than anything, OS X is a Unix operating system. Unix has been around for more than 30 years and has been tried, tested, and refined, and continues to prove itself time and again. This in no way means that Unix is an outdated operating system. Quite the contrary. Mac OS X uses the free BSD version of Unix and is incredibly stable. For example, my last Mac computer had been up and running for 127 days without a reboot. Power and stability are just a few of the key features that Unix provides as an operating system. Finally, because Mac OS X is made by the same company that makes every Apple computer, the integration between the hardware, your computer, and the software, Snow Leopard, is incredible. When you install OS X, it installs all the software needed to control every aspect of your computer, such as the EyeSight camera, graphics card, mouse, and everything else. For the most part, there's no need to install any third-party drivers for your computer because it's all contained in the Mac OS X installation. Let's take a few minutes to look at the history of Mac OS X. In the late 90s, Apple had reached a roadblock with their current operating system. It was dated and couldn't really be improved from where it already was. Their solution was to release a brand new operating system called OS X. The first official release of OS X was codenamed Cheetah, and it was the first iteration of the Unix operating system that we now know as OS X. Each successive release of OS X maintained the Big Cat code names, and so 10.1 was codenamed Puma. 10.2, released after Puma, was codenamed Jaguar. 10.3, Panther. 10.4, Tiger. And 10.5, Leopard. And finally, the latest and greatest version of OS X, version 10.6, is called Snow Leopard. Now, Snow Leopard provides a lot of new features to the operating system that we'll discover in the upcoming video tutorials, but there's a lot of refinements and improvements that have been added in Snow Leopard that are more behind-the-scenes improvements that improve the performance and functionality of the operating system that equates to a better user experience. Take the installation, for example. The installation of Snow Leopard is much faster than previous versions due to changes made in the process by which the files are installed. In addition, they've drastically reduced the footprint of the overall operating system. What this means is that the operating system itself takes up much less space than previous versions of OS X, as much as 7 gigabytes less space, leaving a lot more room for files such as photos and documents on your hard drive. In addition, new technologies have been implemented into Snow Leopard, such as 64-bit computing. 64-bit computing is the future of computing, and virtually the entire computing industry is shifting toward this model. 64-bit computing allows computers to process more data in less time and allows computers to address larger amounts of memory as well. As a matter of fact, 64-bit computing allows applications to address a theoretical 16 billion gigabytes of memory. Wow! So rest assured that Snow Leopard is ready for the future. You should also know that all the applications that ship with Snow Leopard, such as the Finder, Safari, iCal, and many more, have been rewritten to take advantage of 64-bit computing. Another new technology implemented in Snow Leopard is called Grand Central Dispatch. You see, traditionally the developers of computers would increase a computer's speed by ramping up the clock speed of the computer's processor. However, doing this created a lot of heat within the computer and also consumed more power, which is not as good for the environment. The solution was to create processors that had multiple processor cores, which improves performance with much less power requirements. Grand Central Dispatch allows developers to take ultimate advantage of the multiple processor cores in every Mac. Finally, Snow Leopard introduces OpenCL, which allows developers to take advantage of the graphics processor in each Mac to speed up performance and provide a snappier user experience. So enough with the techie stuff, let's get on with the rest of the video tutorial.